Welcome to Creeping Celluloids. This is episode 1. We're going to be looking at Fright Night.
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster. I can't stand it.
You are so cool, Brewster. Hey, this is Creeping Celluloids. We're going to be talking about Fright Night. Yeah, Fright Night, released in August of 1985. It was written and directed by Tom Holland.
Not that Tom Holland.
No, not that one. The other one. The Tom Holland that we're going to talk about some more. Tom Holland's pretty important, actually, to some horror fans. And we'll talk about why later.
And to toy commercials, too.
Toy commercials?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, too.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know about that. So, yeah, Tom Holland, he wrote the script in 3 weeks. And by all reports, he said he was laughing to himself hysterically the whole time. He's having a great time writing it. He had the idea of a horror fan who becomes convinced that his neighbor is a vampire. The brand new, suave, sophisticated neighbor who moves in next door. He's convinced he's a vampire. And Holland said he struggled with the idea until he thought of the character of Peter Vincent. He said he was thinking of what would this person do, and he said to himself, well, obviously, a horror fan would go get Vincent Price. Or Peter Cushing. So he created a character named Peter Vincent, Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, combined them together. And that is when the story really got going.
See, I was upset. I thought his name should be Peter Lee Cushing, and then we get Christopher Lee in there. But there's actually a scene in the movie where
they mentioned
they're watching Christopher Lee.
They watch Christopher Lee, yeah.
So they do get him in there. They get the 3 big horror names in there.
The Hammer guys are all in there. And he's often said that like William Ragsdale is kind of the brain, or his character Charlie is the brains behind the story.
He's actually the boy who cries wolf.
Right.
Throughout the first section of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, they bring that up in a lot of internet stuff, I noticed. Boy Who Cries Wolf was pretty important to the way he structured the story. So yeah, it's once he thinks of Peter Vincent, then the story is off and running. He said in an interview, I believe it might have been in Search of Darkness, I'm not sure. But he said somewhere in an interview that Charlie was the brains of the movie and Peter Vincent was the heart. And that's what really got things going.
What was Evil Ed?
The naked
idiot sidekick?
The naked dog.
I call it the puppy man at one point.
Puppy man, yes. Oof, yeesh. That's really uncomfortable when you start talking about Stephen Jeffries, actually.
Yeah. As a boy in anything. I'm sure we'll talk about him later, too, again.
So, before we even go, though, I want to say one thing. We chose this movie as the first thing we were going to do, because we both absolutely love this movie.
Yeah, and we have a hard time deciding on what movies we're going to do. And then when we both talked about this movie, this is a movie that both of us love. And me personally, I remember seeing this in the video store when I was a kid. The cover of the video it looks like a cloud of a vampire over a house. So that it always caught my attention when I was younger, and it's actually one of the first horror movies I rented as a kid.
It is without a doubt one of my all-time favorite movie posters.
And it's kid friendly too. It's really not. Well, it's not overly gory,
but there's some boobs.
It's covered though; they're not fully exposed. She has the sheer thing on, right? What part are you thinking with the?
I don't know. Maybe my imagination was filling in blanks.
Amy, the girlfriend.
No, I was thinking about the girl at the window.
Yeah, right. She does.
Yeah.
Skip that front part. Then watch it on TV. You can watch it with your kids.
Be selective in editing it. So you wanted to talk about something with the importance.
of
context.
I think that this movie is important because in the early '80s, when we were growing up, you didn't get a lot of horror movies with the universal monsters per se. There was a lot of slasher movies, and this movie actually at points makes fun of the fact that slasher movies are taking over. So this movie's released is in the mid 1980s, 1985. Prior to this, the only other vampire movie that makes any headway in 1985 is the movie The Hunger, which stars David Bowie
and Catherine Deneuve.
It's very vampire-y, but we go further after this movie.
Very artsy, though.
Yes.
Like it's much more of an art film than it is a horror film. Yes. And I don't know, any goth fans out there, it's the premiere of Bela Lugosi is Dead by Bauhaus was in that movie.
And David Bowie plays a great role in that movie. If you're a David
He's
Bowie
always
fan.
good. He's always good.
If you're a David Bowie fan, you haven't seen the movie The Hunger, go see the movie The Hunger.
Yeah.
So that's 1983. In 1985, we get a resurgence of vampire movies because we get Fright Night, obviously. We also get Life Force, which is about space vampires.
Such a good movie.
And at some point, we'll be doing a podcast on Life Force.
I love that movie.
You also get 2 vampire comedies. Once Bitten,
Jim Carrey.
starring Jim Carrey, and Transylvania 65000.
With Ed Begley Jr. and Jeff Goldblum.
Which is, if you've never seen either one of those, go try to download them or rent them. Like we saw these movies on VHS tapes.
Yeah.
You guys, all you have to do is go and stream them. It's much easier.
Yeah, it's easy to find now.
And then the rest of 1980s, we get some of the greatest vampire movies ever made. The Lost Boys,
Near Dark.
Near Dark, and Vampire's Kiss.
Vampire's Kiss? Oh, the one with Nicolas Cage.
The one with Nicolas Cage.
Do you know I've never seen it?
It is Nicolas Cage being Nicolas Cage.
Yes,
At a
of
very
course.
early age.
Is he good?
No.
You can't answer that question. Nobody can answer that question.
He is sometimes, he's not sometimes.
No. There's no way of judging whether he's good or bad.
I like all his movies.
Nicolas Cage exists in a place either above or below such judgments.
I am a fan. I enjoy that he makes 37 movies a year because it's just more Nicolas Cage I can watch or decide not to watch depending on how good the movie is. But check out Vampires. One of his really early movies.
This is going to connect to something I'm going to bring up later, but if Nicolas Cage moved to India, he would be able to work as much as he wanted. I mean, they make like 200 movies a year there. So
There you go.
yeah, but that actually India and Bollywood, that's going to connect to something I found online.
All right, good. I'm good.
Okay.
Glad we're connecting.
Yes.
We're not going to connect to Nicolas Cage again. That was
Yeah, no, we're not coming back
that
to
was a
Cage.
whole Nicolas Cage spiel.
Story. What's this movie about?
What would you do if you accidentally discovered the house next door was occupied by something not human? Something horrifying. Something unspeakably evil. No one believes you.
Mom, I didn't have a nightmare.
Not your
They
mom.
did kill a girl over there.
Not your girlfriend.
Charlie, is this some sort of a trick to get me back?
Not even the police.
Look, I know it's crazy. I know that, but look, Lieutenant!
It knows that you know. You'll do anything to protect yourself. But it will do anything to protect its secret. Fright Night. If you love being scared, this could be the night of your life.
Okay, so quick story summary for Fright Night for anybody who hasn't seen it. And by the way, if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this, A, shame on you. B, pause this and go watch the movie and come back and listen to it.
Yeah, you can download it on one of the streaming services like we did.
Oh, absolutely.
Or buy.
Buy the Blu-ray, which I went out and did. So anyway, the story's about Charlie Brewster. Charlie Brewster's a suburban kid, loves horror movies, and he's got a girlfriend named Amy.
He's one of us. He's a horror fan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's an average teenager, lives with his mom.
Yep.
Divorced mother, single
Yep.
mom living with a son.
Right. Yeah. Do they talk about where the dad is, or are they just divorced?
They never say really where the dad is.
No, they don't really bring that up, right?
And they rarely say what the mom, like, they don't really say what the mom's name is. They don't really talk about the mom.
Yeah. No, she's just Mrs. Brewster,
Right.
really. She's really good. We'll talk about that in a minute, by the way. She's like really funny in the movie.
And
But-
his favorite actor is
Peter Vincent, who hosts a show called Fright Night. Very much like Elvira or Zachary or
the only difference is
Ghoulardi.
he shows his own movies.
He shows a lot of his own movies, right?
So he's
Right.
the host and the star of the
Yes.
movie that they're showing.
Where he is Peter Vincent, fearless vampire killer. And one of the things that Ronnie Mcdowell, the actor who plays Peter Vincent, said was he really wanted to make Peter Vincent a very bad actor. And when they show the clips of the movies he was in, he's just terrible. And it's amazing that Ronnie Mcdowell was actually able to be a bad actor, because it takes a good actor,
He's
I think,
acting to be bad.
to be a bad actor. It's really funny.
He won a Saturn Award for this role.
He did, yeah. I was going to bring up this won a bunch of awards,
Yeah.
Saturn Awards that year, against some big movies.
Uh,
Yeah. So anyway, a neighbor moves in next door to Charlie, 2 men, and the mom is very interested. She mentions at one point how handsome one of them is.
She's single.
She's single, right? And Charlie one night sees them carrying a coffin into the house. And through a course of events, he becomes absolutely convinced that Jerry Dandridge, the man next door, is a vampire.
And they jump right in. Like we see
there's
right
no
away
waiting. Yeah.
that this is happening. There's no backstory. We jump
Nope.
right in.
No, and that's one of my favorite things about the plot of this movie is it just goes. It just goes. I mean, within I want to say about 30 minutes, Jerry is already confronting Charlie.
He sees him with a woman
in the window,
which is kind of a big mistake on his part. I think you would think you tried to hide that.
He cares.
And that's part of the greatness of the neighbor. Like he knows that he's seeing him, and he's still going for it. And
there's a sort of exhibitionist quality. The what they do really well with this movie that a lot of vampire movies do is the vampires are just way left of center behavior wise.
Yes.
Like they're just weird.
They're not regular vampires like you see in earlier movies.
Yeah, and they're not like the sort of glamorous, respectable vampires that show up in movies later.
He's your next door neighbor.
These are monsters, and they don't care.
And he does not care.
Right. So Charlie tries to convince the police of this, that he's a vampire. Of course, they don't believe him.
It's like that part. The beginning of the movie is like a rear window.
Rear window, yeah, because he sees it
sees
literally
it
through the window. Yeah.
Gets caught seeing it, and then everything ensues from him getting caught. Right. I mean, and right out at the beginning of the movie, he gets caught.
I absolutely love that scene where Dandridge he comes downstairs and Dandridge is already in his living room, and he's been told by Ed that vampires can't come in unless they're invited, but the mom's already invited him in. And he says at one point something like, oh, I'll be over here all the time when you least expect it.
But that's one of the good things about this movie too. Is that they use all the vampire tropes that we've loved for years and years. But they twist it, and it's twisted so perfect.
And they don't play games with it. It's the stakes are raised right away. There's no mention of like, oh, maybe Charlie's crazy or the audience is unsure of what they're seeing. No, it's very clear. Dandridge is a vampire. Charlie's the only one who knows.
And no one else.
And now he's on
him.
his own. So he does what I guess would other teenagers do this? He contacts his favorite actor, Peter Vincent, the vampire killer, to help him. Peter, of course, is not convinced.
Which was kind of easy, in my opinion. It was kind of easy for him to go and contact, and not only but meet with his favorite actor who's, I guess at this point, a celebrated actor. He's well known. He hosts his show. He starred in movies.
So local TV people, you can't just go and show up and meet them. I mean, I used to go talk to Ernie Anastas all the time. I mean, what do you...
Knock on his door and say, hi, here, I need you to help me kill the vampire. And the fact that he believes that a guy on TV who's a vampire hunter can help him kill an actual vampire shows that he is a little bit crazy.
He might be. He might have a little trouble with the difference between reality and fantasy. Yes. I guess he just doesn't have anybody else to turn to, and he's in a panic.
Well, no one else believes him. Mm-hmm. Girlfriend doesn't believe him. Mom doesn't believe him. He even calls the police at one point. Police don't believe him. No one believes him.
Well, it's one of the charms of this movie that the whole thing seems to take place in a very small world. This one suburb where
2 houses,
everything's there. There's a TV studio if they need it to be. And there's it's a suburban community.
At the end of a street, the TV studio?
Yeah, it's just like sort of right there, Which is one of the charms of it. It almost like, without the gore and the nudity, this could almost be like a children's story. Like where everything just is in one little town, everything you need is right there, To
me, it really helps build Monster Squad later on, a couple years later. Yeah, so it has a real Monster Squad feel.
Well, there's 2 reasons it makes me think of a Monster Squad. A, it deals with the traditional frightener. It's vampire. And Dandridge, by any other name, he's Dracula. That's what he is.
He's Dracula.
Yes. And he's about the coolest Dracula you're going to find.
He plays Dracula at some point?
In his career? Sarandon played Dracula?
He plays Dracula. He voices Dracula in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon.
Oh, that's great.
In 3 episodes of Teenage Mutant Ninja, which I was... And my research came around, I was like, oh, that's
I had no idea.
He gets to play Dracula. And I wonder if they cast him as Dracula because of Fright Night, which I would guess yes.
Oh, it's great. So anyway, Amy and Ed, who Amy is Charlie's girlfriend and Ed is his friend, who's a little creepy horror fan guy.
But is it really his friend?
No, he's very antagonistic.
They're kind of jerks to each other.
They really are.
They kind of make fun of each other, and they kind of they don't get along really, but... It is his friend.
Yeah, sort of. But you get the idea that maybe they
don't like each other. Or they were friends at one point, and then Charlie got a girlfriend, and the teenage got a girlfriend, not friends with your friend anymore. He's jealous. Happens.
Yeah, it's funny that we can read so much into this, and it's really a very simple movie.
Very simple movie.
And you really don't need any of that backstory. It just works because the actors are very good.
Did you see the thing with Tom Holland made each of them write a backstory for the characters? So we get from such little time, we get so much character in each character because they're really invested in the actors really invested in their characters in this movie.
Yeah, they did a great job. I mean, every cast member does a great job. There really isn't anybody in it who has a major part that you can point to and be like, oh, that person's not good. Everyone seems to have had a great time doing it, and they all do such a fantastic job.
Like, this is a good movie. This is not.
Oh no, it's a
bad movie, and we will be looking at bad movies on this podcast. This is not in any means a bad movie.
No,
well acted, well written, a good horror story.
Yes, I will defend this movie to hell and back. I love it. I absolutely love this movie, and I have since I first saw it. So anyway, Ed and Amy convince Peter that Charlie might be having some kind of breakdown, and they pay him in order to play along. He gives Jerry a test. It's fake, with fake holy water, which is a great scene.
A great scene.
And we'll come. I want to talk about favorite scenes later. That's definitely one of mine.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then Jerry basically kind of threatens him. On the way out of the house, Peter notices that Jerry doesn't cast a reflection in his mirror. Now he believes. And Jerry knows that they know because he steps on a piece of glass.
He breaks the mirror, and Jerry steps on the mirror, and that's when
it just
to me
kicks into overdrive.
Right there is when we hit the second act.
Yes.
We know someone else knows now that Jerry is a vampire. And it takes a whole nother life after that. The movie turns. It wasn't really gory or wasn't really horror up until that point.
Yeah, and then it really gets going. Yeah, it really gets going. Now Jerry hunts everybody. He turns Ed
right after that. He turns Ed into a vampire.
Ed into a vampire in a really weird, creepy scene, which works really, really well. He seduces Amy, right, as his new girlfriend. Oh, because there's a painting in his house.
Yes.
Which wasn't in the original script. That Sarandon came up with that. He wanted that little subplot. He wanted a little romance subplot. And we don't know who it is, but there's a painting of somebody in his house who looks just like Amy.
A very old painting.
Yes. So, and he says to Amy at one point, "Oh, that's someone I knew a long time ago." But he never elaborates. They never say it's his lost love or
again, they don't
whatever.
need to. They don't need to go into it.
We just need that much.
We know there's a connection between him and Amy.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite parts about Jerry is anytime he's on the screen, we get this synthesized, spooky music.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, see how scary that is? I'm scared right now sitting here.
Yeah, that music. I think the song is called "Come to Me" by Brad Field, I think you pronounce it, or Fidel. And the soundtrack is the soundtrack's very good in this movie.
And not easy to find.
No, really hard to find. It's not on Apple Music. It's not on Spotify.
How can we get that on Apple Music?
I don't.
Call somebody. You must know.
I have to.
That's one of my favorite parts about Jerry. The other part about Jerry that I love throughout the movie is, unlike other vampires, he's always eating an apple.
Yeah, every scene. And that's another one of Chris Sarandon's ideas. That he's cleansing his palate between drinking blood.
Right.
And his DNA is primarily
fruit bat.
Fruit bat.
So Jerry Dandridge is not only a vampire in essence of a vampire, he's actually part fruit bat vampire. Which is fantastic as an idea to change the whole scope of what a vampire is when he turns back into a bat.
Yeah.
Which I'm betting no one ever thought of before until he thinks of it.
And what's also weird when you watch the movie, you'll notice that Chris Sarandon can make almost any activity seem ridiculously charming. He's eating an apple, and the guy looks fucking charismatic.
Yeah. and the whole part too with the eating an apple is, if you think of any vampire movie you've ever seen, they never eat anything. If I remember correctly, there's a scene in, I want to say, Near Dark, where he eats something and right away throws it blood because after you become a vampire, you're not supposed to be able to eat anymore. But the fact that he makes this into a Fruit Bat says that he can actually eat it. And then if you look at some of the legends are the vampire starts with bats in South America.
Yep.
There's
Yeah.
vampires down there, legends, and they were from Fruit Bat. So he builds that character on his own without ever even mentioning anything about the Fruit Bat. He makes it more interesting to us as horror fans.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's these little touches that Sarandon throws in all over the place. So anyway, he turns Amy into a vampire, but Charlie and Peter, they have to defeat Jerry Dandridge by dawn to save her.
Which I don't understand.
I don't know. It didn't work for Ed, but it's
Right,
going to work for
I
her.
thought of that too. That
Yeah.
they could have tried to save Ed.
They didn't really seem to bother.
They didn't really-
Peter just kind of kills him
Yeah.
in one scene,
And they both
which actually connects to another favorite scene of mine.
they both become bloodthirsty vampires.
Right, exactly.
And they only save Amy, but
Yeah.
don't save Ed. Which
Yeah.
okay, I guess.
They had this great climactic battle throughout the house at the end, where they're fighting Dandridge in both his vampire form and his bat form. They fight the assistant, who's played by an actor named Jonathan Stark. I'm trying to remember the character's
Jerry
name.
Cole.
Jerry Cole, thank you.
Now, what was he?
Okay.
I have a problem, and I've seen this
They
movie
think
a
he's
million
human.
times.
They think he's human, so they shoot him in the head at one point.
Right.
He falls down the stairs, but then he gets up again. And
they
as he's approaching him, they're shooting him.
They shoot him 6 times.
Yeah, and he doesn't die. But then they stake him, and he turns to liquid. And he's not a vampire because he's out in the day
Right. So that to
through the
me,
whole movie.
I've seen, and I know, like you, I've seen this movie a ton of times.
Yeah.
And at first, when I first see it when I'm young, I think, hell, he's a zombie, and they have to kill a zombie, and they kill him. And then when they kill him, he like turns into this green goo.
Yeah.
And then he turns into sand,
Yep.
and like his skull rolls.
It's almost like he goes through decomposition really,
Right,
really
but
quickly.
what is he though? They never
I don't
go
know.
into it. He doesn't have a coffin.
Nope.
He doesn't show any of the attributes of a vampire. He's out in the day.
Yeah.
He's like Jerry's assistant. So it would say he was a zombie.
He's like his Renfield, if you're
Right,
familiar with
that's-
Dracula. Yeah.
He's his Renfield, but he only gets killed when he gets hit with a stake in the heart.
Yeah, he dies the way a vampire dies, but he goes through like rapid decomposition, and then there's that great moment where his skeleton just goes in
it
pieces
just
down the
falls
stairs.
down the
It's
stairs
good,
and he's-
so good.
And they if they're shooting him 6 times, does nothing. They hit him with the stake, and
Yeah.
I still to this day don't know
Yeah.
what he was.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't know. That they don't really tell you. They don't name the monster. Of
Well,
him.
if you know Lost Boys, no vampire dies. It's the same way.
Yeah, but he's not a vampire. He can't be. He doesn't follow the same rules. And in the movie, the rules are very clear.
But the whole stake is the only thing killing. Maybe he's part other kind of vampire. He's
Oh, we're stretching
what's
it now.
what's the big bat? The big.
I think we're stretching it now. I don't think we need to know. That's one of the great things about the movie too, is that there's so many things that are left unexplained, and it's great.
You have a lot of questions when you leave it, which is always good with a movie. that
Always good.
Not everything is answered, and that's better than having everything
Yeah.
spoon fed to you.
And not in a way where it feels unresolved or unfinished. Just you didn't need it.
We walk
Yeah.
away from this movie satisfied.
Yeah, and it's what, an hour and 80 minutes? No, an hour and like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
at most.
It's not a long movie.
No.
It gets the job done in an hour and a half. It's a well-written script, and
Great work.
we're done. And we move on to a second one years later. But
Yeah, I never saw the sequel.
sequel's good.
Yeah.
It's
The
Jerry's
sister.
sister.
Yeah.
Hunts
Charlie and Peter,
in
right?
college.
Yeah.
And he gets Peter back again.
I'm gonna watch it one of these days.
Yeah,
I'll get to
and if you haven't watched it, watch it. Ed's not in it because the actor who portrays Ed, Stephen Jeffries, goes and films another horror movie called 976 Evil.
Directed by Robert Englund.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if again another movie, if you're familiar with Stephen Jeffries, he should have been a horror movie icon, but we'll talk about why he's not.
Yeah, I have questions.
Lots
When it comes
of
to that.
questions, lots of inappropriate, uncomfortable questions.
It's very uncomfortable questions. We reach this climactic battle. They're fighting the bat form. They're fighting Jerry.
You know about the bat form?
Yeah, where it comes from.
Yeah.
yeah. I was going to bring it up later. It's awesome.
Fantastic where that
Yeah.
comes from. We'll talk about that bat later.
Yeah, and then so finally, anyway, they have this big battle in the basement. They try to stake Dandridge. It doesn't work. They break the windows. The sunlight floods in. Charlie's fighting Amy at this point, who's
Right.
turned into this hideous vampire monster
Well, she looks really sexy at first.
at first, and then her
And then
face. She
it's
gets
a
this big look.
grotesque
It's actually the
looking
face that's
vampire.
on the poster.
Is
The
her.
main vampire
Yeah.
is actually Amy. It's not Jerry on the poster because the makeup is just so well done.
Which kind of bothers me because if you've ever seen the poster for Fright Night 2, it's the same thing, but it's over a college.
Oh.
It's the cloud.
Really? No.
That
I
same
didn't know
cloud over a college.
Well, that kind of
So
stinks.
it's Amy, and Amy's not in the second
Yeah.
one because actress Amy Beers becomes famous after that.
Yeah, she was on Married with Children.
Married with Children.
Right. They kill Jerry. He explodes, turns into a bat skeleton thing.
Yep.
And then he's gone.
Great special effects.
Amy-
Practical effects.
Great practical effects. Yeah, Amy is saved. And the movie ends with Peter Vincent back on Fright Night. He's going to show a Martian movie this time because he's sick of vampires. And you hear Ed, or they pan over to Jerry's house, and Charlie thinks he sees eyes in the dark. And then he blinks and it's not there. And then he's back in bed with Amy, and you hear Evil Ed laughing and saying, "You're so cool, Brewster."
Charlie, is something wrong?
Nothing.
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster!
The movie actually was supposed to end in a different way. There was an alternate ending. And again, I looked around online. I couldn't see if they filmed it or not. But there is an ending. The original ending in the script was that Peter Vincent was supposed to turn into a vampire on television, which made me think of The Howling, the way The Howling ends. Where
On the newscast.
yeah, where she turns into a werewolf on national television. And then The Howling 2 just completely ignored that happened.
Is that why they changed? What year is the Halloween? Do you know?
80, I think?
So is that why they changed this? Because it's too much? I mean,
Maybe.
It was a good ending.
Yeah, no, I like the ending of this.
Me too.
Yeah, I like the original. I actually like the theatrical ending on
Yeah,
this one.
I liked
Yeah,
that ending too.
but I don't like the idea of Peter Vincent becoming a vampire.
No.
Yeah.
It goes against everything that was going on in the movie too.
So I'm kind of hoping that they made that decision just out of general good taste and not,
And there is a sequel, where, as we've said before, Jerry's sister comes and hunts down Charlie. Charlie's in college. There was actually supposed to be a third movie. This was supposed to be a trilogy. The third movie is supposed to be Charlie older with his own kids. He moves back into his mother's house. Jerry's house is abandoned. And apparently Evil Ed lives in Jerry's house and is trying to reincarnate Jerry.
love it.
And that would have involved Peter Vincent. It would have involved Charlie's children, but it never got made. And we actually end up with a reboot years later.
Which I haven't seen, but I have to say I'm generally negative about reboots.
It's not bad. It actually isn't bad. It does some things. And all honesty, if I was going to change anything in this movie, it's something that happens in the reboot. I think that Jerry should have made vampires at points. That there should have been more vampires.
More vampires. Okay.
And in the reboot, Jerry makes vampires.
Okay.
So he has like a whole thing in his basement where there's a whole bunch of
Different
teenagers from the town.
Oh.
He turned into vampires.
Maybe I'll check that out.
It's actually not bad.
I actually like everyone I know that's in it.
Me too, and that's
I
why
like
I
Colin
watched
Farrell. I
it.
like David Tennant. You know, I just
David Tennant plays Peter Vincent as Doctor Who.
yeah.
He's actually
that's
Doctor
what
Who.
he's the 10th Doctor, really.
He's-
Yeah.
and which isn't a bad thing. I love Doctor Who. I'm a huge David Tennant fan. I think that the reboot is nowhere near as good as the original, but it's not a bad reboot.
Yeah.
With that being said, they make a second one after that reboot, and it is possibly one of the worst vampire movies ever made.
Okay, now that one I'll have to see.
Awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like fun awful
No,
or just really
bad.
Ooh.
Just like, why would they make a high budget Hollywood movie as the reboot and then make the sequel as trash?
I have a theory, and it's a theory as to why Fright Night turned out so good too. Well, they were just to get into a little bit of the making of the movie. There's Holland. He wrote scripts before this. This was the first movie he directed.
Well, do you know the first thing he directed was?
I thought it was this.
The first thing he ever directed.
Oh wait, this non-movie.
Non-movie. The first thing he ever directed. So Tom Holland gets his start as an actor.
Yeah.
He acts in over 200 toy commercials in the 60s and 70s.
Really?
And his first directing
Wow.
job is he directs a low-budget Hasbro toy commercial. Mm-hmm. And then he becomes friendly with Shelley Winters.
Oh.
Shelley Winters helps him with his career as a director, not as a actor. But he does appear afterwards in some movies, as like in some TV shows, as an actor after Fright Night's made.
I saw this really great picture of him riding a bicycle with George Takei and somebody else. I have to look up the picture. It's this awesome picture of him and George Takei on a bicycle together. And George Takei has like long hair. It's like in the 70s at some point before they did the Star Trek movies. Oh, it's great. And George Takei, of course, is laughing.
And Tom Holland's a Hollywood guy. And he knows the Hollywood 70s. And
Well, yeah. I mean, he I didn't know about the toy commercial thing, but the first thing he writes is or the first screenplay on the list that I found that was a movie, not a TV show, was Class of 1984.
Yeah.
Starring Michael J. Fox in his first role, which oddly connects to Fright Night if you look at the Saturn Awards thing. Then he writes Psycho 2, which everyone was pissed about this movie, but the script was so good that it changed Anthony Perkins' mind about doing the sequel. And it got a lot of heat at the time as being not a great movie, but there's been sort of a critical reappraisal of Psycho 2.
I don't think I've ever seen Psycho 2.
From what I remember, it's actually a pretty good movie. Norman Bates is not the killer in the movie.
But Norman Bates is in the movie.
Yes.
Okay.
But there is killing, but it's not him. It's a whole thing. It's a really complicated plot,
I'll have to
actually.
catch it.
It's really well done. Then he writes a movie called Cloak and Dagger with Dabney Coleman and Elliot from E.T.
Okay.
Henry Thomas.
A TV movie. Right?
No, it was a theatrical movie. When it was first released, it was released as a double feature with The Last Starfighter.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, again, I love The Last Starfighter.
Me too.
Yep. So after this movie was a success, and it was a massive success, like you said, what was the budget?
The budget was $9 million.
And it grossed
$24 million.
$24 million, which is just enormous. It was the second highest highest grossing horror film that year.
And the first was?
I believe not Friday the 13th, but that did come out that year. But Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Part 2 was the highest grossing horror film that year. But all the movies that came out that year, I mean, you mentioned the vampire movies.
Yeah, a number of vampire movies came out.
But if you just look at the horror movies that it was competing with that year, you've got Day of the Dead, which is George Romero's third zombie film.
Which one is that?
Day of the Dead is the one with the military guys on the ground.
That's a good one.
I love that one.
Me too.
Yeah. They have Cat's Eye, which is an anthology movie with Stephen King stories and Drew Barrymore on the poster. You've got Demons, the Bava, and what's his name?
That's an interesting one.
I love that.
We'll have to look at that one at some point.
You got Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, Ghoulies, which was I don't remember it being good or bad, but it was very popular. You have Life Force, that we already mentioned, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Reanimator, which is now a huge horror classic.
Huge classic.
Return to the Living Dead, which remains one of my favorite movies of all time.
That?
That's the one with the eating the brains, and it starts in the medical supply warehouse.
That's a great one.
That same year as this, yeah. And Silver Bullet, another Stephen King adaptation with Gary Busey and Corey Haim.
Corey Haim in the wheelchair is a good movie.
And The Stuff. So all big year for horror, and this was the second highest grossing. So
we gotta talk about The Stuff at some point.
Oh, The Stuff is a great movie.
The Stuff is a strange movie.
Yeah.
Oh boy, what a strange movie.
So after this, Holland goes on to direct, not write, but he directs Child's Play.
Yes.
And Chris Sarandon's in that again with him. Then he did, right after this, he followed up with two Stephen King adaptations. He made the movie version of Thinner, and he made the TV miniseries The Langoliers, both based on Stephen King novels.
I'm a fan of The Langoliers.
I like Thinner and The Langoliers, actually.
If you watch it, if you haven't seen The Langoliers,
the effects are weird.
The effects did not hold up.
No.
So if you saw it now and you see the effects, you won't appreciate it as we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, you won't. But it's a cool story.
But we did get a lot of TV horror movies at the time. So.
True. And it's very much a Twilight Zone style movie, The Langoliers.
Yes.
It reminds me of The Builders of Time. Yes. Remember that episode?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very similar. I have some ideas about why this movie turned out, in my opinion, probably better than it should have.
Reasons why it turned out better.
What's
your reason?
Well, it had a great script. First off, that's what you always need to start with a movie, I think. If you don't have that, you got nothing. Secondly, the producer was a guy named Herb Jaffe, who was an independent film producer. Started as a literary agent. Before this, he had produced a movie called Time After Time, which is actually a really good movie if you ever get a chance to see it.
Another Twilight Zone-like movie.
Very much so, yeah. Malcolm McDowell plays H.G. Wells, who chases Jack the Ripper through a time machine into our time period.
Using the time machine from Time Machine.
Yes, like that H.G. Wells actually invented the time machine.
Which happens to be one of my favorite old-time movies.
That's right, you love the time machine.
I love the time machine.
Yeah. One of my favorite character actors plays Jack the Ripper in Time After Time is David Warner, who you might know as Darkness from Time Bandits.
We're going to have to...
and Tron.
Maybe we'll have to do Time After Time at some point.
Yeah. Or just talk about David Warner. A whole episode on David Warner.
Can we do whole episodes on single actors? Because Stephen Joffrey's, we could probably spend the whole...
Oh, boy, we'll get there. So the other big reason I think that this movie comes out really, really well, not only just the screenplay and Holland's direction was really, really good, but he also allowed the cast big time creative freedom on set, where we already talked about Sarandon putting all these little character touches
and they
Jerry.
write their own backstories.
Right.
Most of it probably never used. We love to see what they wrote.
Yeah.
But they're developing characters before they even get on set and
Right.
start the movie.
Yeah, they all sat down and wrote their characters'
Yeah.
backstories, and they added these little idiosyncrasies like the fruit and the painting.
Right.
That whole thing was brought in by Sarandon. Sarandon's whole idea of how to play him almost like a romantic lead, even though he's a monster, was like really came from him.
It's perfect.
Ronnie McDowell based his performance of Peter Vincent on a couple of different things. That he wanted him to be like a real loser, like a bad actor,
Downtrodden actor
Yes.
who's lost his flair and is now hosting a show where he shows his own movie.
Right, and he took a lot of inspiration from the performance of the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz. Said he kept thinking of that performance when he was being Peter Vincent, and you could tell there's some points where he's just literally just a great big coward. The other reason I think that Tom Holland basically got away with making the movie he wanted to make with a $9 million budget from Columbia was that Columbia Pictures was so focused on a vehicle starring John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis at the time, a movie called Perfect, which was about aerobics.
Oh, I remember
And
seeing parts of it. Never saw the whole movie.
Apparently, Columbia executives were so focused on making that movie because they thought it was going to be the big movie of that year.
It has John Travolta and it has Jamie Lee Curtis in it.
Yeah, they released it in 1985, though, competing with Back to the Future and a whole lot of other big movies.
If you really think about it, 85, times are changing.
True, times
movie
are
scenes
changing.
are changing in 1985.
Yeah. So this weird sort of star vehicle for Travolta and Curtis eats up all the executives' time, and they don't pay attention to what's going on with Fright Night.
So Tom Holland does whatever he wants.
He said nobody visited him on set once from the film company.
So he doesn't get anything from
No notes
from the company telling him what he has to change.
Exactly.
He does the movie he wants to do.
He just makes the movie that he and his cast want to make, and that's why I think it turns out the way it does.
It's probably why most movies are bad or good, depending on how much input people who don't know how to make movies put into it.
Exactly. We always see this over and over again.
And we will see it on this podcast, movies that get ruined
by studio notes. Right. Really cool thing. He had basically an open set for journalists. In fact, there was a writer for Fangoria, and I'm going to look up her name and I'll put it in the description.
Fangoria was a big horror magazine back in the 80s and 90s where we got all of our horror news. We didn't have the internet to log on to and see what was going on. Fangoria would publish monthly, and they would tell you the upcoming movies that were coming out, and that would push you to go see a movie or to rent a movie if they were going right to VCR. We had a lot of movies back then just went right to VCR, never went to movies, but we had a lot of horror movies.
Yes. And this writer for Fangoria was just allowed to hang out on set during the entire 2 months of shooting, which just doesn't happen ever.
And I remember a cover of Fangoria with Amanda Beer's character's face on the cover. It stands out distinctly to me when I was younger this movie has some iconic figures in it.
Yep.
The characters are really Amy's character, Evil Ed, Jerry as the Bat, really just they stand out.
Really,
I don't think this movie gets the credit that it deserves.
No, it's a really big cult classic, but I think it really should be thought of as just, in general, a film classic.
It should be held in regard like The Lost Boys and like those vampire movies that got us back into vampire movies.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have movies like this, you don't have the vampire movies you have today.
Right. And you lose a long time with the original Frighteners, like we talked about. Like, it was all slashers.
Yeah, it was all slashers.
What about it?
Were you serious?
Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately, none of your generation seems to be.
What do you mean?
I have just been fired because nobody wants to see vampire killers anymore, or vampires either. Apparently all they want are demented madmen running around in ski masks, hacking up young virgins. if you would excuse me.
He wasn't the only one that was tied to slasher movies in 1985.
No, yeah. Roger Ebert, who was not known as a fan of horror films during his
He
career.
bashed horror films throughout the early 80s.
Yeah. He liked Fright Night. He gave it a really great review. And if you read up on it, he quotes that bit from Peter Vincent.
That line that
he
you
quotes
just heard.
that. And he basically says it's the kind of fun movie that horror movies should return to.
It's a throwback to classic horror movies.
Yeah.
Dracula,
Yeah.
Frankenstein. It's a classic Universal Monsters movie.
And he pitches it, as an anti-slasher film, right? He actually says in his review, Fright Night is not a distinguished movie, but it has a lot of fun being undistinguished. That's true. It's not a distinguished movie. It's not a vanity
It wasn't
project.
gory. There's not a lot of gore in it.
No.
And if you really think about the movie and you're really watching the movie and pay attention to what's going on in the movie, you really only see Jerry kill 2 people in the entire movie. He kills those 2 bouncers.
That's right.
In the club scene.
Yeah.
You don't see him kill any of the people in his house. They mention on the news that there's some mangled bodies and
headless corpses.
Right, but you don't see him kill anybody. Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of gore. We see Jerry and die, and we see his Renfield die, and that's about it.
Yeah.
On screen, we don't see a lot of deaths.
Yeah, compared to a lot of stuff that was going on at that time, it was really
Compared to the Friday the
mild.
13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's just everyone in the scene dying. This really is a throwback horror movie.
Yeah, it really is.
Like even before the Hammer ones, because the Hammer movies we see a lot of blood and gore. This is a throwback to the early, Dracula movies and the movies that are classics now. This should be held in regard as a neoclassic, I guess to say.
Right, but it plays so much better than the PG-13 horror movies that are around now that are lacking real
Story.
punch and story
Or characters.
That's the big thing.
This has a story and characters that you really latch onto, and even the villain Jerry Dandridge, you don't hate him in this movie.
No, you don't. You really don't.
You the only person you really hate in this movie, in all honesty, if you watch me, you hate Ed. Ed is a jerk.
I didn't hate Ed.
I hated Ed
Really?
until he turns into Puppy Man, and then when he turns into Puppy Man, you feel bad for Ed when he turns into Puppy.
Well, let's talk. You know what? I want to talk about the
Let's talk
cast
about the
a
cast.
little bit.
Okay.
So William Ragsdale, he gets cast because he originally auditioned to play Rocky Dennis in Mask and didn't get it. He lost to Eric Stoltz.
He loses out in a lot of movies at this.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. And but the casting director Jackie Birch likes him, and she recommends that he audition for Fright Night.
So
she introduces him to Tom
Holland. He doesn't get
Holland.
that movie.
Right.
He gets introduced in that movie.
Yeah.
He also tries out for Weekend at Bernie's too.
Oh, and he didn't get
doesn't
that too?
make Weekend, and the lead in Weekend at Bernie's really reminds me of him. It could easily be him.
Oh yeah, probably could, right?
And he doesn't get that movie.
Oh wow. So Stephen Jeffries, who plays Ed, he auditions accidentally for Weird Science because he shares an agent with Anthony Michael Hall, and the agent accidentally sends him to audition for Weird Science when they ask for Anthony Michael Hall. He shows up. Jackie Birch is also casting director on that movie. She says, "You're not Anthony Michael Hall," and he does this really awkward audition, realizing that they don't want him there at all. But she likes him, and she also introduces him to Tom Holland, and he gets the part as Evil
So
Ed.
she really is the one behind the.
Really key to how this movie turns out. Tom Holland already knew Roddy McDowell because Roddy McDowell was in class of 1984.
Right.
So they already knew each other, and that's how he got McDowell into this. The story of Chris Sarandon is really interesting. He gets sent the script because I think Tom Holland just thinks of him off the top of his head. And it's like, let's try it. Sends him the script.
Well, he's an Oscar-nominated actor.
Yeah, he was nominated for Dog Day Afternoon. Did he win for Dog Day Afternoon?
No.
No? Okay. Anyway, he gets the script. He's a big theater guy. He's living in New York. He likes to do stage. He reads.
But he's not a huge name.
No, he's not a big name, but he's known.
No, yes,
Yeah.
known.
But he gets the script and he's thinking, I don't want to do a horror film. He's afraid of being typecast. He doesn't want to work with a first-time director. But then he reads the script, and he's so blown away by how the movie is structured and how it's put together. And like I said, it's a great script. It really is. It wins him over.
That's what makes the movie.
He flies out to L.A., meets with Tom Holland. Tom Holland pitches the movie to him basically scene by scene. And Sarandon realizes that this guy's got the whole movie in his head ready to go, and he's like, yeah, I want to do this. And he realizes also that he's going to be allowed to do a lot of creative stuff.
Is he the first one that signs on? Who's the first one that signs on for the movie?
I honestly don't know. I'm guessing McDowell, because they already knew each other.
Right.
So I think that might have been it.
Cole's in that favor and McDowell.
Right. Amanda Bierce gets cast from like a cattle call audition.
Well, it's funny with Amanda Bierce. She stars in Stephen Joffrey's previous movie.
She was in Heaven Help Us?
The
one before it.
The one right after it. He's in Heaven Help Us, then he's in another movie, then he's in this movie.
Okay. I don't know the name of it.
Fraternity Weekend.
Oh, okay. Yes, they knew each other.
They knew each other.
Yeah.
And so did she stars in a movie before this with Chris Sarandon also.
Oh, she did? Really? I
Called
didn't know
Protocol.
that. I didn't know that.
So there's some connections within the movie that
they kind of all knew each other.
Right.
Already.
They kind of knew each other before, and that to me that adds to the movie.
Right. This camaraderie they have on the set.
And it actually, to me, it's the Adam Sandler theory to me that you get people that you're friendly with in a movie, the movie works much better when there's people who get along in a movie set.
This is better than an Adam Sandler movie, though.
Oh, this is better. Yes, this is better written than Adam Sandler. And I like Adam Sandler movies, but I like when people star in movies together, more than one movie together. It just shows that there's
see chemistry.
Right. And chemistry is an important part of making a good movie.
Yeah. Amanda Bierce made a joke. I was watching a live stream that they did at a convention, GalaxyCon, I think, from 2019. I think.
Okay.
They did a live stream, the whole cast talking to each other via Zoom before pandemic, I suppose. And then Amanda Bierce mentioned that she was actually competing in the audition with girls who were actually 16, and she was 26 at the time. She was actually among the younger cast members. She might have been one of the older ones.
Yeah. She doesn't have a huge role in this movie, but she plays it great.
She's great in it. Yeah, and that's really what everybody. I mean, I mentioned before. Even Dorothy Fielding, who played Mrs. Brewster,
who has a very small part,
very small,
very few lines.
She's very funny in the movie, and you get a sense of her character just from a few minutes.
Right.
You know, it's just everyone does such a great job.
She plays that the single mom, because when the good looking next door neighbor moves in,
so funny.
Right away you see she's interested in him as a possible love interest.
Right. And at one point she's like, oh, he's probably gay.
Yeah, right. Because he moves in with
a man.
With a man.
Yeah.
Which at the time was a little off, but
there is a lot of mention about there being gay subtext in this, and it's probably there. I know Tom Holland probably added some of that in. There's parts where you see some scenes and you're like, oh yeah, maybe they're hinting at these two guys are a couple. For me, it doesn't add anything to the movie. It's interesting, but I feel like it doesn't add much.
But I would think if you look at vampires as a whole, vampires are sexual. And
since Dracula, there's no
difference.
Yeah. It just feels like it doesn't. That subtext is interesting, but it doesn't really add anything to the enjoyment of the movie, as far as I'm concerned.
But you could get into gay subtext if you really want to. Stephen Jeffries, but Stephen Jeffries as an
are we gonna?
So Stephen Jeffries, in my opinion, should have been a renowned horror actor. He's not a horror fan. So in interviews he does, he never liked horror movies. He's big sci-fi fan, but never really was into sci-fi. But after he makes Fright Night, and then he makes another movie called 976 Evil, and he continuously stars in movies here and there. He goes on to make a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of gay porn movies.
Yeah.
And he stars, he changes it, he goes by a different name. He's Sam Ritter. So if you want to look up Sam Ritter, that's Stephen Joffrey's. He does.
And then clear your search engine.
Yeah, please don't. Just search for Stephen Joffrey's adult. And I still to this day can't understand why he does this. He's offered movies constantly during this time period, but he really just goes into porn, and usually it's the other way around.
Yeah, usually it's the porn and then regular movies, which there's always been
Sylvester
Stallone. Apparently, there's rumors about Joan Crawford and Marilyn Monroe.
Well, the two easiest ways to get into Hollywood are porn and horror.
Right. They're the two.
But once you get in,
gateways.
You don't go back.
Or they were. Now it's YouTube.
Now it's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's still.
So it's this or porn,
This or porn, yeah. We didn't get hired for those. So to this day, he's still popping up in movies here and there, horror movies. He's still held in high regard for his previous things, but the whole porn thing,
Well, Stephen Jeffries. I don't know if you look up stuff on Fright Night online, but if you find this podcast, can you contact us in some way? Because I'd love to ask why. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but honestly, it doesn't make sense.
We're just interested to know why.
Again, we're not making fun.
We're not judging.
No, not in any way. In fact, I was trying to find some kind of answer to this. I read an article on Paper Magazine online, where they talked about his career in adult films. And the tone of the article was actually really kind of mean-spirited. It was like they were just making fun of him the whole time. And they, I guess the question I have, it's so easy to kick the porn star around, I suppose.
Again, you could say that
it's really unfair.
You would think that most people go into porn for money.
Right.
They're hurting for money.
Yeah.
I don't think at this point Stephen Jeffries is hurting for money. He's being offered jobs in horror movies.
Yeah.
He's becoming a horror icon at this time.
Kind of known. Yeah.
He's starring in. He's the lead in 976 Evil.
Mm-hmm.
He plays a great role in this movie.
Yeah.
I personally just want to understand.
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because, like we said, it's the opposite of most other career trajectories.
And he was a Broadway.
He won a Tony Award early in his career.
He's an accomplished actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he won a Tony Award. Then he started doing movies. He did Heaven Help Us, which is actually a pretty good movie if you ever get a chance to see it. It's got Kevin Dillon and Andrew McCarthy in it.
It's a
few other people.
It's a good coming of age story.
Yeah,
in 1950s.
Yeah. Yep. And then he does that movie you were talking about, Fraternity Vacation.
Fraternity Vacation, which is a typical 80s, kind of crazy movie, sex comedy, nudity.
Yeah. And then you get Fright Night. And then 976 Evil, and then
a lot of
adult films,
and
stage work at the same time apparently.
Yes. And he's starring in he's appearing in regular movies throughout this.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
But again, we're not judging, not making fun at all. We're just curious.
We want the story behind it.
Yeah, like why? What was that choice? I think there's probably a really good story behind it, and I'd be really interested to know what that story is.
What are we going to do?
What are you gonna do? Not me. Yeah! Now, I used to admire you. You know that? Well, of course. That was before I found out what a fake you were.
Let's talk about the most accomplished actor in this movie, Ronnie Mcdowell.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love Ronnie Mcdowell and have since I was a little kid and saw Planet of the Apes.
Me too.
I don't know why. The other people under the ape masks, I never even thought about who they were.
I still don't to this day think about who they are.
No, but Roddy McDowell I do. And I think maybe it has something to do with his voice and the way he portrayed Cornelius and Caesar. He was just really good. Good.
And he's actually in the TV show too.
Yes, that's right. He was Galen.
He was Galen in the TV show. So he stars in the Planet of the Apes movies throughout. And if you want to put movies on a list of movies that I love, Planet of the Apes is on that list.
All of them.
I'm
all of them.
Have been a huge fan.
Yeah.
The originals. My whole entire life.
I dig the newer ones too. The three new ones.
I do too. One of my cousins in one of them. So.
Oh really?
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
We could talk about that at some point down the road.
Yeah, but those are good too. But the originals, they used to show them. They show them on like a TV,
Channel 7.
Channel 7
we
TV
came
marathon,
home from school,
right?
It would be the movie of the week, and they would do it in consecutive weeks. You would see all of the original Planet of the Apes movies.
Yeah, I was never better behaved as a child than when those movies were coming up because I knew if I got in trouble, my mom would not let me watch them.
You missed it.
And if you missed it, you missed it.
You missed it, and then next year you'd have to wait for it to come on again because it came on yearly.
Right. This was before they were on VHS
or anything
or anywhere.
Literally on. You would come home from school. It was like the 4:30 movie on Channel 7 movie of the week, and if Planet of the Apes was the movie,
that was a good.
I was glued in
week.
front of my TV.
They did the same thing with The Godfather when I was a kid too.
And they played that on what?
I don't know, it was a nightly thing where they played each one night. Or they split them into two and then played them for 4 nights.
That one night thing.
Yeah.
You missed that.
You missed it. You were done.
You missed the Star Wars Holiday Special. You never got to see that again.
Maybe you were glad.
No, we will be talking about the Star Wars Holiday Special at some point.
Oh, I don't know.
Roddy McDowell has a star on the Walk of Fame.
Oh, awesome.
So if you're in California, 6632 Hollywood Boulevard is where Roddy McDowell's star is.
Wow. I'm going to look it up on Google Maps. I don't know when I'm going to get to LA. But.
And also his most important role, he plays Bookworm in the 1966 Batman series.
I forgot he was that.
He stars as a villain and if you know the 1966 Batman, a lot of actors from this time period, the famous of the most famous,
many good ones,
star in the show. Roddy McDowell stars as Bookworm, and he has the distinction of also playing a villain in the Batman animated series.
Which one was
he?
he?
Voices the Mad Hatter in the Batman animated series, in Superman animated series, and in the new Batman animated series. So he plays a villain in the 66 Batman, and there's only two other people who have voices on the original 66 and who actually voice on Batman animated series. The other two are Adam West.
Oh, right, because he was like an older... was he Wildcat?
He plays someone later on. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And who else do you think it is?
Not Cesar Romero.
No, the Boy Wonder.
Oh, Burt Ward.
Burt Ward. The
Oh.
only other two, 3 people lend
Who
their
was
voices.
Burt Ward in the animated?
He some off-shot voice.
Really? Oh, that's cool. That's a good series. It's on HBO Max.
That's a good series.
I gotta watch it. That and The Brave and the Bold.
Oh yeah.
So good.
Well, I'm watching Justice League Unlimited right now too.
Oh, that's
and
another good one.
They just put the Super Friends on, which
We should do a podcast about animation too.
oh yeah, listen. If we do a podcast about Batman animated series or any of those, we could do that for.
It'll give me an excuse to watch He-Man Revolution.
I'm still holding off on. And one of the cool things too about Ronnie McDowell on this film is, in the scene in his apartment, he has a lot of movie memorabilia in there. And one of the movie memorabilia was his mask from Planet of the Apes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
So,
I gotta go back and watch again.
Special effects from Planet of the Apes gets into Fright Night. Nice little connection there. And the special effects in this movie are really important.
I still want, I think for my walls in the basement, I still want, there's a Planet of the Apes poster that was for the entire series of movies. And it's just got a gorilla in uniform pointing at the viewer like Uncle Sam. And it says, 20th Century Fox wants you to go ape. Yeah. And it has all the list of the movies on the bottom.
That's a good poster.
I want that poster. It's online. You can get it for pretty cheap, actually.
I expect to see it here next time I'm here.
Yeah. We'll see. My wife might have
So
something to
the
do with
special effects in this movie
special effects
are practical.
Yes. And it's Richard Edlund, who previously worked on Ghostbusters.
And how does that connect?
The Bat Monster was a recycled version of the original design for the library ghost in Ghostbusters.
Too scary.
They thought it was too scary, and he took the puppet that they made, turned it into the bat creature that we see in this movie. The work is great,
and that bat creature looks like a fruit bat, so it does have a very connection back to Jerry being the fruit bat vampire.
And again, my theory that if you leave a bunch of artists alone, don't send them studio notes, let everybody do what they do best, you're going to get a better movie. The makeup on Bierce at the end, the makeup on Amanda Bierce, that big long face and everything, that was actually kind of thought up at the last minute by Holland. He said we want when she turns around, we want like a big punchy,
it was horrific
visual thing, right? Originally she was just going to look like she did with the fangs, like kind of like Ed.
Right, and she's kind of turning into it. I mean the part where Ed too, where Ed looks horrible with the cross mark on his head. That's another. Let's talk about Amy first.
Yeah, so she turns around, she's got that horrible face in the basement, and it was done almost the last minute by the special effects people. They kind of, Tom Holland was like, we need like a big like oof moment, like a big and so they did it, but they pulled it off. They did it almost overnight, and they didn't like the way it looked. And Amanda Bierce even was like, I don't know about this.
It's a chest too. They do.
Yeah, they did the fake chest.
Yes, that's not really.
I got a good story about that. They thought it looked bad, and then it turns out it ends up on the poster.
Cover.
Yeah, it is the image everyone sees now.
It's what we saw when we went into the video store.
Yeah, one of the things. This was another thing that I learned from that streaming thing I watched. Amanda Bierce had the fake boobs that she wore in the movie for years, hanging in her closet, and she brought them to a convention.
They were big.
Yeah, she brought them to a convention, and had them on the table while she was signing, and somebody came over and offered her like $600 for the prosthetic.
I want you to think about that. I want you to sit back and think about that.
Yeah.
You go to a horror convention probably, and there's a lot of horror conventions around the country throughout the year. And you approach Amanda Bierce, who starred in Married with Children. She was the next door neighbor. She's in this movie, and she has fake boobs sitting on her table.
So the guy offers to buy it for like $600 or something like that. And Amanda Bierce, I guess not really thinking, because she was signing autographs and stuff, she sells it. She just says, yeah, sure. She takes the money or whatever. And now she says not a day goes by that she doesn't think, who has it and what is he doing with it?
Why did he buy her fake boobs? She's creeped out.
Somewhere out there,
there's a man
with fake boobs that she wore in Fright Night. Fake vampire boobs out there. Yes. So one of the really interesting things about this too, afterwards, talking about conventions, when they originally released the movie on DVD, it didn't have a director's commentary. And fans were really kind of annoyed by it because a lot of fans, this movie has such a heavy fan base. I mean, they are really devoted fans.
And we when we get it first, me and Brian saw this on VHS.
Yeah.
And so during the VHS time, there's no commentary. No. We get the movie. That's all we want.
Yeah.
And then when DVDs come, we've grown to love this movie. We're older.
Yeah.
We want to know more about the movie, so
Right.
we want commentary.
So, but there was no commentary. Apparently, it was just straight from the VHS onto DVD. So, at a convention in 2008, the cast had reunited. The surviving cast. I think McDowell might have been dead by this point.
I believe he
2008, yeah. And they recorded their own, with Holland, their own cast commentary that could be downloaded by fans and played along with the movie.
Oh.
So they provided that at first. Now, I don't know if that's the same commentary that's on the Blu-ray now, but I think it is. I think it's still the same one.
I'll have to listen to that one
Yeah.
these days. Now, the last time that they were together, so I was reading about it too, and the cast reunited last year, and they did a reading of a full script reading to raise money for the Democratic Party.
Right.
And since Ronnie McDowell is no longer with us, he's passed away. They needed someone to read Peter Vincent's part. Do you know who they asked to sit in with them and read Peter Vincent's part?
No, who was it?
Mark Hamill.
Oh, really?
Mark Hamill sits in on this fundraiser for the Democrats to Fright Night. I don't get the connection, but
Does he do?
I would think
Ronnie McDowell?
I would think he does. He does. I would think he plays it as knowing Mark Hamill as the great voice actor that he is. The Joker in Batman.
Yeah.
Stands out in a number of other things.
And I think he was in something when he was young, some sci-fi movie that was important, right?
I have no idea. I don't know.
He played
where,
Luke something.
Some
whatever.
Some Disney movie.
Some Disney thing, yeah.
That
when
I
he was
don't
a
think
kid.
we're allowed to talk about.
Before he did Corvette Summer.
We get Corvette Summer, great movie, because we get sued if we talk about anything that has a mouse in it.
Shh! Don't bring up a mouse.
I think they're creeping around right now. So they do that. They raise money. I would love to hear that.
Oh, me too.
So we're gonna have to look for that afterwards.
Me
If
too.
anyone has a line on it, let us know.
Yeah. I want to talk about Mark Hamill at some point in this podcast too, about all the great things he's done for fandom in general.
And he's a fan.
Yeah, he is a fan. That's why. Yeah, like there's an early picture of him wearing like Star Trek T-shirts before he was in Star Wars.
Wearing Marvel shirts throughout the years too.
You said Star Wars. I said Star Wars. You said Marvel.
We're
all right.
getting
The first and last episode of the podcast, guys. Sorry.
It's been fun. So Mark Hamill is not only a fan of fandoms like we are, he's also a collector. And we're going to end each of our podcasts talking about collectibles for the movie that we reviewed. So that you, as a fan, if you like what we're saying, you can go out and look for the collectibles for this movie. Maybe you know some of them exist. Maybe you have some of them in your house. Maybe you don't. So.
Yeah. This is kind of like the further reading segment of our podcast, except we're not going to give you, well, I might give you some reading, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is sort of like, hey, go and do this now.
Go and look for this, or go and read this if it's something like that.
Yeah. So you want to go first?
No, you can go ahead. You
Okay.
can talk about
Well, I was going to talk about the comics. And I knew there were Fright Night comics, but I didn't know that much about them, honestly.
Me neither.
Because, I mean, when I read comics, I still read comics.
Me too.
I love comics. And I tend not to really look for movie tie-ins, honestly.
I'm not a big horror comic fan.
Yeah, me neither, usually. One-shots here and there I like, or even some of the continuing series like Hellblazer I always liked, but overall horror comics that aren't limited series, I'm not usually a fan of.
Me too. And this was not a limited series.
No, it was not. It ran from 1988 to 1993. It was put out by Now Comics. They published 27 issues in that time. Again, Now Comics was a small company.
Independent company.
And actually, they ended up going out of business, which is why they stopped putting out Fright Night comics.
And I'm actually going to start looking for these Fright Night comics for Brian.
I am actually thinking of going and getting these because there's some interesting stuff.
I'll be at a convention on this coming weekend, so I'm going to look for Brian.
Nice. So yeah, the comics explore the further exploits of Charlie and Peter. And not about vampires. They fight all different kinds of monsters. Yeah. Actually, that's what I thought of when I read the synopsis of how the series goes. It reminded me of the TV show Supernatural.
Now, they do a couple of issues of a movie tie-in to start.
The first 2 episodes are the first movie.
Right.
Then they have a one-shot graphic novel dealing with the sequel.
Okay.
And then that's it. No other connections to the movies.
But all of them, they all star Peter Vincent.
Peter Vincent and Charlie. Not all of them. There are some of them that are one-shots. I'll get to that in a sec. But Evil Ed turns up as a villain in a few different storylines. And then there are these really I noticed this online. People talked about these as most fondly, actually. There were these one-shot, one-and-done issues that were actually movies that Peter Vincent was showing on Fright Night. But they were these really cool, like, horror anthology stories. And people kept talking about one issue, which I think was issue 27, might have been right near the end, called Puppet. About this little girl who wants a pet, and her father won't let her have it, and it turns into this real creepy Twilight Zone story. Yeah. So it sounds really, really interesting. So again, they also put out 4 annuals, and all of the annuals were 3D issues.
Come
you
3D
come with the
glasses, the old
glasses,
1980s 3D glasses.
Yeah, with the red and blue ink.
Yep.
Yeah. So like I said, Evil Ed was a regular foil.
The worst part about those, if you lose the glass, you can't read the comic.
That gets canceled when Now goes out of business. And when it gets canceled, it's in the middle of a storyline where Jerry Dandridge has been brought back from the dead, and he's raising an army of vampires among the Parisian prostitutes in Paris. And Peter and Charlie are going to Paris to fight him and his army of French prostitutes.
So if you're
this is how it ends. They don't get closure.
If you're a fan of Fright Night and you're buying the comics monthly and you're reading them, the story you've been waiting for is you're waiting for Jerry to come back, right?
So
Obviously,
they
that's
bring
what you're
him
looking
back.
for. And then they end the series. And to this day,
They didn't want to end the series. The company went out of
company
business.
goes out of business. And to this
Now
day,
goes out of
no one
business.
has picked up the Fright Night comic series.
Which, think of this. Just everyone out there is a fan of this movie, even if you're not. Think about this movie. A young man, and an old man travel to Paris to fight an army of French prostitute vampires.
Sounds like a movie. Sounds like a sequel.
It would be so good. It sounds like such a good story. I want this movie.
Well, the problem I have with this too is that there's not a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah.
At all.
Any producers out there who there's no way they're listening to this, but any producers out there who hear this, drop whatever reboot you're planning right now. Please don't reboot Back to the Future. Please don't reboot Jaws. I know that's what you're thinking of. Don't do that. Please give us a third Fright Night movie where Charlie and Peter go to Paris and fight an army of vampires.
William Ragsdale as Charlie, Mark Hamill as Peter Vincent.
Or like a relative of Peter Vincent. His brother or something.
Oh, that's
right?
a good one.
Right?
His son.
Yeah, right. His nephew. Whatever. Who cares? I don't even care.
We wrote the reboot.
Yeah,
there you
right.
go. Give us a call.
And Stephen Jeffries returns as Ed, who is now this sort of partially decomposing, quasi-dead, quasi-alive vampire.
He takes the place of the other guy, of his Renfield. He becomes that
he's
guy.
like the
He's not
Renfield.
vampire-y. He's kind of puppy boy.
This would work out so well. Before we continue... No, you go
So,
with collectibles.
for, again, not enough stuff out there for a movie that is held in such high regard.
It's so weird because there's such a rabid fandom.
And when we first started this, we thought we were going to find tons of like memorabilia. And if you look around, you see tons of memorabilia for Friday the 13th, tons of things for Nightmare on Elm Street. For this, literally, there have been 2 companies have made things. Recently, Dead Mouse Productions made a 3 3/4 figure of Peter Vincent. Very limited, very hard to find. They sell for about $30. A couple of years back, the Distinctive Dummies production made Mego-like figures, and if you come from the 70s or 80s like me and Brian do, Mego figures were about 8-inch figures. They had all superheroes. They had a whole bunch of storybook characters, Ivanhoe, tons of things. This company makes Evil Ed, they make Jerry with Charlie, and they make Amy, and they only made 50 of each. So it's a very limited run.
Lord.
The Charlie and Jerry 2-pack sells for like $1,200. Jesus. And then the only other thing I could find was enamel pins by this company called Headstone. They make Amy and Evil Ed.
I like a nice enamel pin.
Amy and Evil Ed, it looks like they're coming out of TV. It's good. But we really thought we were going to have tons of stuff to talk about here. The fact that they haven't made a Funko Pop of Evil Ed, or that they haven't made a Peter Vincent
That's crazy.
Figure. Mego has licenses to tons of horror movies now. If Mego's revitalized, they're putting out monthly. They're putting out new things. They just signed a huge deal with G.I. Joe. They're making Hasbro G.I. Joes now. Someone get on this. Make some Fright Night figures.
I can't believe Funko that makes everything.
Everything.
I mean, there's an Ava DuVernay pop,
There's,
and there's no Fright Night pops.
if you can think of a character, there's a pop.
It
based
doesn't.
on
That's just.
And
nuts.
there's nothing. I don't know who owns the rights to Fright Night at this point.
It must be Columbia still, right?
Let's get some Fright. Even when you would think when the reboot happened,
Let's get
they
some
would
NECA
put something-
figures.
Get it exactly, Brian.
You know?
Exactly what I thought. Get a NECA figure of Peter Vincent or of Jerry.
Evil Ed.
What are we waiting for here? There's a market for it.
When I was a kid and I first saw this movie, Evil Ed was my favorite character. If there was an action figure of him, I would probably definitely get it.
Right now, you would get it.
I would get it now, absolutely. Yeah, but
So,
then I'm an easy sell.
I mean, me too. So, you know, and the thing about the figures that were released, Amigo-like figures, nobody knew about it. So no one who was a fan really got them, and they sold out within like 3 days.
Oh yeah,
And
especially
now
if there was
they're on
only 50 of each.
and now they're on a secondary market, and the prices are ridiculous, which tells me that there is a market for them.
Oh, definitely. Without a doubt. And not only that, but like I said over and over again during the podcast here, there's such a rabid fan base for this. I can't believe there's not more stuff.
I mean,
This movie has such a devoted...
shocked.
Like, when I was doing research for this, I kept thinking to myself, what are we... Like, if a real fan of this movie, like a deep fan of this movie is listening to this, they already know all this.
Absolutely.
You know? And
I hope that if you're not a fan, you go and watch the movie and you become a fan.
become a fan, because it's worth it. Yeah, it's a good one. One thing I do want to talk about that's a little out of left field. In 1989, Fright Night was unofficially remade in India as a movie called Kalpana House. It's set during Christmas time. Peter Vincent is recast as a priest, the character.
Okay.
It includes several song and dance numbers.
So on the next episode of our podcast, Kalpana, whatever Brian just said, will be... No, I'm kidding.
We're going to have to do Kalpana House next.
Kalpana House next.
And all of the
same,
music.
Same premise?
Same story.
Approved by...
No, unofficial.
Oh, it's one of the Indian rip-off movies?
No, they do that all the time.
Because we have to do like Indian Batman or India. Spider-Man is a good one. There's a whole bunch of good Indian knockoff movies.
Indian Superman.
Yeah. So at some point we will do an indie movie. Maybe, probably not this one, but
no. But if you're interested, and I'm sure it's a good time, because there's not a lot of Indian movies that aren't good times. Honestly, I mean, yeah, we want to make fun of them a little bit, but honestly, they're pretty funny, and I think they know they're funny.
I'm thinking this is our first YouTube episode.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Where
So
we release this to the world.
we'll talk about Kalpana House.
There you go. We release it to the world.
Based on our Fright Night podcast.
There you go.
So yeah, if you're interested, go on YouTube, look for Kalpana House. I'm sure it's a good time.
Of course, now that I've been made welcome, I'll probably drop by quite a bit. In fact, anytime I feel like it. With your mother's kind permission, of course.
Oh, Jerry, anytime. So nice that someone interesting has finally moved into the neighborhood. Charlie, are you all right?
Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. I just gotta get back to my trig, that's all.
Nice to meet you, Charlie. See ya. Soon.
Hey everybody, Brian here. Chad and I hope you enjoyed our premiere episode of The Creeping Celluloids. Look for us on the 3 majors of social media. Search up The Creeping Celluloids and you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And stay tuned for episode 2 coming soon. We're going to be focusing on the classic Disney sci-fi movie, The Black Hole. Until then, have fun and we will see you soon.